I read something once. A great brand does not have to be loved by everyone, but it will often be loved by those it best serves. There are different things interesting about different brands to me, that's a given. Clothing isn't always the most important thing when looking at a brand from like a holistic point of view. Aime Leon Dore, or ALD for short, falls within this category for me. The clothes are fine, and I do enjoy some pieces and like some of the items that I've seen from ALD, but what has interested me more about ALD than the pieces of clothes that I've liked is the marketing tactics and the entire identity that they've embodied. ALD has a bit of a fuzzy community feel to it, and I think that's very intentional. Some of the marketing tactics that they've used to grow their brand tremendously throughout the years have interested me more than some of the items that have gone trendy. Taste, a very ambiguous but very real concept in that when you know it, you kind of feel it. You taste it. Taste appeals to the coordination and the curation of a space or someone's personal presentation. And I think Aime Leon Dore does a fantastic job at creating taste. ALD is one of those brands that gives you a level of social class within your intimate group of persons who might be familiar with the brand. Teddy Santis, of Greek descent, started ALD in 2014 with a very common goal at the time of merging streetwear and luxe fashion. Two very old terms at this point. The 2014 period was a transformative time to experience online. Enthusiasts wanted a more mature appearance in the street fashion scene, and brands like Fear of God, Kith, Yeezy all came around that time where Chelsea boots and sophisticated loungewear or athleisure was trending. Nothing really new, as trends are cyclical. This 2012 to 2016 time period was such a cornerstone to the next decade of fashion, and the persons present at that time continued to dominate the space in fashion. Right, we took a little bathroom break, had to take off fat shit. The goal was to cater to an audience that was separating themselves from an expressionless, snobby, professional look, but at the same time elevate themselves a bit above the adolescent, streetwear, very bold, branded aesthetic. It was like a middle ground of the two. From 2014, the origins of the brand to a decade later, through trial and error, ALD has become the face of the 25 to 45-year-old hype enthusiast with 401ks and car loans. ALD has gone on to work with New Balance, Porsche, Rimowa, Clarks, Timberland, New Era, and Kith, just to name a few. But why ALD? Why not just another brand from around the same time or one even older? What about ALD has resonated with the demographic with the strongest buying power in one of the most expensive cities in the world? When I think of ALD, I kind of think of an ethnic Kith.
And Julius came, took it out of the air, and dumped it.
ALD pulls its influence or pulls the core essence of the brand from a black preppy Americana fusion with that vintage hip-hop aesthetic. Specifically the way in which Ralph Lauren would be styled in, let's say, New York. At its essence, the brand was curated for that vintage New York hip-hop fan that turned accountant. Which brought me to the Lowlives, a group of young black street pharmaceutical entrepreneurs. Yeah, I like how that sounds. They adopted the pieces made by Ralph Lauren because he was the last one to find out essentially he was making clothes for flying niggas. And we understand the trickle effect of style and influence. Those who possess the idea of status and say-so in a community are now those used as the curators of style and artistic expression. 50 plus years later, we have ALD, which is an ode to that nostalgia. At least that's how it started. ALD made clothes for a defined aesthetic that had no brand to call their own. Greek influence, tapestry, rugs, treats, textiles. Growing up in a Greek family restaurant, to be honest, I don't know why this aspect worked and would love to get feedback here. Maybe the feeling of novelty. This is the individuality aspect of ALD. I know something that you're usually taught when building a brand, like more on the marketing and business side instead of the artistic side, is to not make the brand too much about yourself, and that like your personal style, your personal preferences. And while that is important in building the overall brand, I think sometimes in the storytelling, getting a bit too personal and making it your individualistic story kind of puts you at the focus point, and telling your story within your brand can come off a bit impersonal to everyone else that is trying to like resonate and purchase from the brand. But with ALD, that's different. Teddy Santis pulled aspects from his Greek heritage and incorporated it into ALD, and I think that gave it that unique stamp that during that time when brands were doing similar designs, they kind of stood out because of that unique element that was also authentic to him and his heritage. I think from an outsider looking in, knowing that New York is very diverse in multicultural and multi-ethnic groups, I think that also lands home or resonates with a lot of people from that community, because they see something that may not one-to-one or may not specifically relate to them, but it's a culture that they would have grown up around and kind of feel like they are neighboring partners, or in some way have like a symbiotic relationship with. In my eyes, the main element of market segmentation and targeting that ALD used when devising and constructing their ideal customer was that of psychographics. I know demographics and behaviors played a big part in how they constructed their ideal customer, but I believe bigger than that, or more specific than that, it's the psychographics and the internal beliefs and ideals and goals of those people that really center and set apart ALD's core niche group in comparison to the rest of it. I believe the psychographic elements, meaning the mindset and mentality, drives the community more than just their shared age. With an age group of 25 to 45, with statistics showing the common denominators are a shared interest in professional advancements, a desired financial goal that is followed by a shared interest in hobbies, it seems as though the current interest of Gen Z is less about lifetime possessions and more about lifetime experiences. So let's talk in the 7-bedroom, 4-bath mansion, and more of an interest on the ability to visit Rome in July, Morocco in August, Paris in September, and Turks in December. Less about owning 6 supercars, but more about owning 2. I think the idea of hyper-consumerism is still there, it just looks differently, and it appeals to more of an image pointed by brands like ALD, Jacques Mus, Bottega Veneta, and Gucci. One of the books I'm reading right now, Design in Japan by Kenya Harrell, kind of briefly talks about this as well. And he was saying that because of the housing developments in Japan has become a bit monotonous and uninspiring and also very costly, he much rather live in a subtle, humble, simple apartment complex and be able to travel the world and gain experiences than to spend all of his money and savings on having a big, fantastical house, or even just a house that he isn't really inspired by. And I think the same concept applies here, and it's kind of telling about the age group and the generation that we are in right now. I think even myself, I kind of resonate with that. If I had to make a choice about having the ability to travel the world at my free will, but living in something that is a bit more modest and humble, or the other side of it, which is having these, I guess, grandiose possessions, but having restrictions on travel, I much rather take the first than the latter. However, due to the Gen Z's lack of experience in the workforce and the poisonous influence of social media, I think Gen Z is at a disadvantage in certain instances where there's a bit of disillusionment. There's an unrealistic, unattainable lifestyle that is projected onto Gen Z, particularly due to social media, that gives them an idea that working professionals are pressured to achieve. There's a particular lifestyle that is put onto this generation that they need to achieve. And I think the frustration and the disappointment that comes with not meeting that expectation and not living that lifestyle can then lead you to coping mechanisms like purchasing things that you can attain or that you could kind of attain, like by payment plans. What I think happens is through this coping mechanism of failing to meet the expectation of the lifestyle that you wanted, there's a disconnect with reality that is now bridged by purchasing these trinkets that can bring the lifestyle that you want. It's kind of like the lipstick concept where a recession indicator is concerned. What I'm talking about is salary dysmorphia. And I think salary dysmorphia, if that's a real term, I think it is. Somebody look it up. But I think salary dysmorphia affects Gen Zs in a very specific way. And I think brands like ALD, whether it's malicious or not, thrives and benefits off of this kind of frustration and coping mechanism. You cannot afford the Porsche that you thought you would have been able to afford at 28, but what you can afford is the Porsche leather jacket in collaboration with ALD after like 5 to 6 payments that you could hang at the back of your driver's seat of your Nissan Altima while you shut down on the side of the road. You know, I think ALD thrives on the disillusionment of their bachelor's and master's failed professionals. There's no one answer to the solution of retail, and statistics are there to show points for and against both brick and mortar and e-commerce. What we can agree on is that the solution lies within community and serving the needs of said community. Appealing to the spending habits and behaviors of your community can lead to solving the puzzle that is retail. In the case where a store provides a high quantity of items at a very large variety, there can be little benefit for a physical location because it's easier to comb through a large selection of online than in person, where you can feel like a behemoth of a task, combing through like mountains of clothing. But when you focus on a small selection and an emphasis on the craftsmanship, with the additional benefit of experiencing the quality in person, you see how physical pop-ups can thrive. Therein lies the solution to brick and mortar, sometimes. Then you can blend this with a culture that is unique in its own way, but still resonates with the market in its immediate demographic, where there's a distinct and identifiable sound, smell, and taste for the brand communities that are dying for that opportunity to congregate and spend money as a community. Looking at the analytical performance of ALD, the brand noticeably grew in traffic between the time of September to December in places like US and the UK, which is obvious. US for, clear obvious reasons. It's also holiday time, but the UK could also be attributed to maybe the similarities in lifestyles in certain places like London in comparison to New York. They would have the closest in lifestyles and day-to-day living, but it can also be attributed to the second flagship being opened in London. I was mostly surprised by the gender splits on their clients, with a 55% male and 45% female, which is pretty even given that the brand's overall very overtly male-leaning aesthetic and designs. Age distribution was the highest in age range of 25 to 34 with 39%, followed by 35 to 44 with 17%. To me, and this is my personal opinion, I feel as though in recent years the brand has shifted from a brand that had like mid-tier clothing that was targeted towards that middle-level, middle-class, young aspiring professionals to now a bit of like a 1%, 5% aspirational brand. And when I say aspirational, I mean like unrealistic lifestyle expectation aspirational. I know I spoke about the modern Gen Z and the modern young professional having a bit of a different aspirational lifestyle as compared to their boomer counterparts and even a bit of like their Zs and millennial counterparts. But theirs is still unrealistic in different ways. The way in which we would like to travel and live is still unrealistic. It just doesn't look like that 7-house mansion. And I think ALD is one of those brands that vampires, that leeches off of that and benefits off of that aspirational goal through the pieces that can make someone feel as though they're living that lifestyle when in reality they're not really. I think it's unfortunate to see ALD shift to this 1%er lifestyle because of what the back of the brand was built on. It was built on that Greek aesthetic. It was built on that black prep Americana aesthetic. And it was built on that core hip-hop vintage New York aesthetic. Who are the new people that are buying into the look of ALD? Many of the followers of the brand don't actually emulate the essence or aesthetic the brand pushes, and more so wear the brand pieces that announce to the world that they are part of the community. Funny enough, in interviews, Teddy Santis has been on record stating that he likes his brand because it's far away from that Yeezy Supreme hype fan base, and ironically, ALD has become just that, but for a different demographic. Something that I observed just like looking through some of the aesthetics of ALD and even some observations that I got from like journalists in their findings was that Because the aesthetic of ALD is more so brandless and it's more of like the overall look, but the overall look isn't very specific to ALD. It's a style that can be copied very easily without even using any of the brands. And on the other hand, because of the heightened prices of some of these pieces and it not replicating the quality that you are getting from these items, people have now kind of resorted to buying not replicas, but more so just pieces that fall within the overall aesthetic of ALD without it actually being ALD. And I think what a lot of people have observed and come to a realization is that it's very easy to have that ALD look without even buying any of their items, which is a knock on the individual aesthetic that the brand brings forward, because then it says that all of the pieces don't have this unique factor that you need to go to the brand for. With Rick Owens, it's often slender build of garments and the enlargement or exaggeration of certain proportions of the body. With Issey Miyake, it's most notable for the unplissé pleating pattern, and even with Fear of God, it's their attachment to the muted earth tones and the comfort style pieces. But what is the unique design character for ALD, specifically for a brand at the stage that they are at right now? With the investment and minority stake from LVMH, the brand, you can assume, will continue to be moving in a direction that is primarily focused on growth and expansion. I can only see LVMH being interested in venture capital brands, which leaves the question as to what to expect from brands like ALD in the next 5 to 10 years. With this investment and interest from LVMH, it's very clear that the interest of ALD within the next 5 to 10 years is going to be like expansion and a bit of like domination. So what do we look to expect? What can we expect from the aesthetic and the overall artistry of ALD within the next 5 to 10 years? It's important to appreciate the business side of fashion, because more often than not, we tend to ignore or disregard this aspect of it and only focus on the artistic side. But it kind of goes hand in hand. And once the business is well, then there are resources to pour into the artistic expression and the advancement of like the styles and the pattern cutting and the staff that you could hire, the fabric that you use, and the experimentation that you can embark on. And if there's no business, then there's no money to pour into that. So as much as it might seem a bit boring sometimes to dwell on the figures and the business side of fashion, I think it's very crucial that we have an understanding and even look at where the money goes. Because sometimes where the money goes and where the investments are coming from can give you like an overall idea of the direction that the brand is going to go. I like ALD. I hope that's evident. There's a feel-good nostalgia element to the brand that many brands have not been able to emulate. The way they have aligned their market and give their customers an identity outside of just a t-shirt or jacket is a salute to how marketing can look at its highest level. Coming from Teddy Santis, who has spoken about starting his career at a family restaurant and building his career more so on the marketing side than on the design side, speaks to the success of the brand. If we're being honest for a moment, it's great marketing and fantastic world building. And this is the reason why a brand succeeds financially, other than great designs. And I was recently reading about Balenciaga and his business mind and his ability to cater to the audience that he wants. It was inspiring, especially coming from the 1900s, starting off with the elite and royal Spanish class of San Sebastian, adjusting after the Spanish Civil War, adjusting after the exile, and adjusting after World War II. He has always reassessed his market in improving the way that he approaches it. I think ALD is in a situation where it's beginning to outprice the initial intended market in an attempt to penetrate the higher tax bracket of customers, but will it be worth it in the end? And will ALD now be a brand that only provides cheap logo tees and keychains for the pause, while everything else is costing a car payment? I know Teddy Santis is immensely inspired by Ralph Lauren, but it's also beneficial to carve out your specific role for yourself, and also to see where some of your mentors or some of your heroes have failed and where they have succeeded. Is this another example of a brand using culture to appeal to those outside but not catering to those inside? I don't have the answers, but I do have the questions. My fear for ALD is the more financially successful it becomes and the more it expands, is the less it remembers and thinks about that core market that really gave them the identity and the success that they have today. My biggest fear for ALD is the more and more the brand grows and succeeds financially, the more they might lose touch with the brand building and the aesthetic driven parts of the brand that has carried them to this point in chasing this pseudo luxury unattainable lifestyle that may not even match the quality of items that they are producing. Something that really stood out to me when I was reading about the brand was one of the items that came out was some travel slippers or some travel slides. These very flat, no soling, no comfort slides that was retailing for an unreasonably high price. And the writer was basically saying that she loved it. She thought it was very cute and very dainty. So she showed it to her boyfriend and she showed it to some traditional ALD fans. And they were all disgusted and unimpressed by it. For a brand that did collaborations, many collaborations with New Balance, and kind of understands and appreciates the benefit of having comfort, to now switch and create some travel slides that is the total opposite of that, very flat, very stiff, and very uncomfortable, kind of gives you an idea of the direction the brand is going to head towards, which is unfortunate. At the end of the day, you always need to understand and put forth the community of the brand before some of your personal identity. I think when your personal identity kind of gets trapped within your brand, then you stop feeding the people that has been feeding you. And I think that is where you lose community. This has been another video by Nighttime, made in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you for watching.